Before we start, just a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. Only 2% are subscribed at 1,000 subscribers. I'll be posting a special video. The test stick slipped in my fingers as I turned it over. My name is Lily, and I was 29 that morning. I stood over the sink and waited for my hands to stop. They did not stop, so I forced the test under the stream. If that stick showed a plus, my whole life blew up. As I peed on it, I kept thinking this was stupid. I knew for a fact I was not supposed to conceive. I took medication every day that said so in bold print. Also, I had not touched my husband in months and months. So the only smart outcome here was a single brutal line. The timer on my phone crawled while the test face lay down. My heart did its own countdown that ignored the actual seconds. I stared at the bathroom floor and tried to think of nothing. Thoughts still barged in because my brain hates me like that. I kept hearing my own voice saying, "Relax, it will be negative." I turned the stick over fast when the timer finally went off. 2 lines glowed back at me like a joke I did not get. My chest went light and heavy at the same time, which felt wrong. I set the test on the counter and gripped the edge hard. Pregnant was printed on the tiny screen like it had every right. I laughed once and it sounded sharp, like it came from outside. I checked the little paper in the box because maybe I misread. The instructions were clear about what 2 lines meant, and I hated that. I squinted at the control window, like squinting could erase the second bar. Nothing faded, so my brain started listing reasons this could not be real. First reason was the medication, because that was supposed to shut things down. Second reason was my marriage, which had gone physically silent for a while. I tried to remember the last time my husband and I had actual sex. My mind threw up blank space, then a random image of him on the couch. There was no recent scene that could explain an extra person starting inside me. I ripped open the second test because those kits always give you 2. Maybe this one would show the truth, and the first was a bad joke. I filled a cup with urine like the tiny drawing suggested and dipped the tip. Then I paced while the second test worked wherever those chemicals do their thing. The same 2 bars appeared and my throat tightened like a fist closing slowly. I sat on the edge of the tub because my knees were not reliable. Both tests lined up near the faucet like little witnesses I had created myself. I waited for some hidden camera to appear or for someone to shout, "Got you." Silence sat there instead, so loud my ears almost rang from it. The word pregnant kept looping in my skull like a song I hated. I grabbed the pill bottle from the cabinet and studied the warning label again. There it was in black print about avoiding pregnancy and using backup protection. I had read that line before with this lazy kind of confidence in science. Now every word looked like a bad promise that someone forgot to keep. I pulled out my phone and searched the drug name with the word pregnant. The results were full of rare cases and complicated charts that meant nothing. One article mentioned failure rates that sounded tiny until I remembered I existed in them. I stared at a line about unexpected pregnancies while my stomach rolled in protest. It said, "Talk to your provider if this happens," like that would be casual. I was already imagining that call and how insane my own mouth would sound. I locked the phone screen because thinking about doctors led straight to thinking about Mark. My husband trusted numbers and data and clear reasons for everything in our life. I could already hear him asking, "When did this happen?" like a prosecutor in court. Then the sharper question would follow about who touched me and when exactly that happened. There was no way to answer without sounding guilty, even when nothing had happened. I tried out sentences in my head like some twisted presentation for one person. "Babe, something weird came up this morning," sounded terrible, so I scrapped that script. "I am pregnant, but I swear I did not cheat," felt even worse. Every version made me sound like I was building a lie right in front of him. The room felt smaller with every new draft, and the tests watched from the counter. I realized I was hoping some professional voice would tell me this was a glitch. If a nurse said it happens sometimes, maybe I could repeat that to Mark later. So instead of walking to our bedroom, I opened the contact list for the clinic. My thumb hovered over the number while my pulse hammered in my ears. Calling meant this became official, but not calling meant I had to face him alone. I hit dial before I could overthink it because fear and silence were choking me. The automated menu droned through options while I held the phone with damp fingers. When a real person answered, I almost hung up, which would have been worse. "Hi, I think I might be pregnant, and I am not supposed to be." The words tumbled out, and I waited for her to laugh or gah. "SB or something." Instead, she cleared her throat once and asked how many tests I had taken. "2," I answered, and my voice shook like I was confessing to something illegal. She asked about the medication, and I read the name straight from the label. There was a pause, then she offered an appointment later that day for blood work. Hearing a time on the calendar somehow made the pregnancy feel more solid and heavy. After I hung up, I wrapped the tests in tissue and shoved them deep in the trash. I buried them under coffee grounds until nothing white showed through that dark mess. The whole thing felt weirdly like hiding evidence, even though I had done nothing wrong. I stood there breathing hard and listening for footsteps from the bedroom that never came. Later, I would wish he had walked in right then because everything only got worse. For that moment, though, it was just me and the secret I never asked for. I pressed both hands over my flat stomach and tried to feel something there. Fear answered first, then this thin, careful line of hope that made me angry. I told myself I would not get attached until science confirmed whatever was happening inside. I had no idea that science was about to break my whole life wide open. By the time I pulled into the clinic lot, my palms felt raw from the steering wheel. I sat there with the engine running and my forehead on the rim. Walking inside meant turning the tiny plus sign into a real problem. Staying in the car meant facing Mark later with nothing official. I killed the engine and opened the door before I could chicken out. Inside, my legs carried me straight to the front desk like they knew the route. I gave my name and the receptionist glanced at her screen, then at me. Her eyebrows did this quick lift when she saw whatever popped up there. She told me to take a seat and that a nurse would call me shortly. That word surely felt like a threat, not a promise. I did not sit. I paced a tight line along the wall and counted my own steps. Every time the door opened, I jerked my head up like a guilty person. I kept expecting Mark to storm through even though he had no idea yet. My tongue tasted like metal while I waited for someone to say my name. It came from a doorway on the left, sharp and professional. A nurse in scrubs held a chart under one arm and looked me over. She asked if I could follow her and turned before I answered. I trailed behind her down the hallway, trying not to stare at any doors. I felt like any handle I looked at too long might swing open on me. She led me into a small exam room and closed the door with a click. Her questions came fast and routine, and I clung to that tone. "When was your last period?" I gave her a date that sounded ridiculous even to me. Her pen paused in the air, and that small pause hit harder than the question. She asked about symptoms, and I listed them like I was reading a menu. Nausea, headaches, random waves of complete exhaustion that made no sense. She asked how many home tests I had done, and I told her 2. Her eyes flicked up for a second and then dropped back to the page. That tiny glance made me feel like I had confessed something shameful. She handed me a plastic cup and pointed toward the bathroom down the hall. I took it with fingers that did not feel attached to my body. The walk to the bathroom felt longer than the drive to the building. Inside, I locked the door and stared at my reflection for a second. I looked exactly the same, which felt like some kind of personal insult. I did what I needed to do and brought the sample back with shaking hands. The nurse labeled it without comment and set it aside with practiced calm. She wrapped a cuff around my arm and checked my blood pressure. Her mouth tightened the tiniest bit as the numbers flashed on the screen. "High," she muttered, and I did not ask by how much. When she finished, she told me the doctor would come in soon to talk. I hated that phrasing because it sounded careful and prepared. As soon as the door shut, I let out a breath I did not remember holding. I studied the printout taped near the counter about prenatal vitamins and safety. Every bullet point felt like it was aimed at some other lucky person. I heard footsteps stop outside and then a knock that made me flinch. The doctor stepped in with a tablet and a neutral expression. Neutral faces scare me more than angry ones because you cannot read them. He greeted me by name and checked the band on my wrist. My pulse thudded loud enough that I was sure he could hear it. He asked what brought me in, and I almost laughed at the question. Positive home pregnancy tests I managed, and my voice shook on the last word. He asked how many, and I told him again, different number this time. 3. I lied because 2 suddenly felt flimsy. He nodded slowly like he filed that change away in some mental folder. He opened the chart and mentioned the urgent urine test order. He said T. He result was already back and that it was positive. Hearing it from him hit harder than seeing the lines at home. It felt like the universe had stamped something on my file forever. I stared at a crack near the floor to avoid his eyes. Then he pulled up something else and asked about my current prescriptions. I gave him the medication name, stumbling over the syllables. He repeated it under his breath and his face tightened a fraction. He asked how long I had been taking it and if I missed any doses. I shook my head and the air in the room thickened. He explained that the drug lowers the chance of conception a lot. Not impossible, he added, just rare, and his gaze stayed fixed on me. That word rare made my stomach knot harder than the word pregnant. I felt like the one person who walked right into a warning label. He watched me as if my reaction told him more than my answers. Then came the question I had been dreading from the moment I called. When was the last time you had intercourse with your partner? My mouth went dry so fast I almost reached for the sink. I counted back months in my head and still could not find a recent date. Silence stretched until I knew I had waited too long to sound normal. He tried again, softer this time, and called my husband my partner. I gave him a month that was embarrassingly far in the past. His eyebrows lifted before he could stop them and then dropped back down. He typed something into his tablet that I desperately wanted to read. The clicking of his fingers felt louder than any judgment. He asked if I had been with anyone else during that time frame. The question hit like a slap because of how calm it sounded. I stared at his collar because looking higher felt impossible. No, I answered, and even to my own ears it sounded defensive. I rushed to add that I was not lying and heard how bad that sounded. He watched me for a long moment, and I hated every second of it. He was not accusing me outright, but the doubt hung between us. He mentioned that the gestational estimate would help line up the timing. Then he suggested an ultrasound, just to get more information quickly. The word quickly made my heart hammer against my ribs. A technician rolled in a cart while I lifted my shirt with stiff fingers. Cold gel hit my skin and I flinched as the wand pressed down. The screen flickered with shapes that meant nothing to me at first. The tech angled the probe and then stopped on one small rounded area. There she pointed, and my lungs forgot how to behave. The doctor watched the monitor and started measuring things with practiced movements. He muttered weeks under his breath and numbers I tried to memorize. I caught 7 and maybe 8 and the rest blurred together. He saved images and finally turned the screen toward me for a second. That tiny pulsing dot should have been beautiful, but it terrified me. He wiped his hands and gave me a printed estimate for the due date. The paper felt heavy when he placed it in my hand. According to the measurements, I was further along than I expected. That timeline clashed hard with the month I had given him earlier. I watched him notice the same problem and say nothing. He mentioned follow-up blood work to check hormone levels. He talked about risk factors in a careful, almost gentle tone. The words flowed around me without really landing anywhere solid. I nodded at the right moments just to keep things moving forward. Underneath, my mind kept circling back to the math that did not add up. When I asked again about the medication, his expression stayed controlled. He repeated that failure for that drug was very uncommon, but not impossible. He added that the lack of recent marital contact complicated things. That phrase stung more than it needed to, like he knew our bedroom life. He told me we would sort things out with time and more data. Before I left, he asked if my partner was supportive. The question almost made me laugh because of the assumption baked into it. I imagined Mark's reaction when I handed him that due date. I pictured him connecting the timeline faster than I could explain it. My throat burned as I answered that we had not talked yet. The doctor suggested involving him soon and offered couples counseling referrals. That suggestion made my face heat with a mix of anger and embarrassment. He probably thought he was being kind, and maybe he was. To me, it felt like someone already planning fallout from my supposed mistake. I took the little stack of printouts with shaking fingers. The nurse returned to schedule another appointment 1 week out. She circled the date on a card and pressed it into my palm. I noticed a flicker of curiosity in her eyes that she tried to hide. Staff hear stories all day, they know messy situations when they smell them. I shoved the card into my bag like I could shove down the situation. On my way out, I paused by the restroom door and almost ducked in. I wanted to splash water on my face until all expression vanished. Instead, I kept walking because I needed to reach the parking lot. If I stayed any longer, I would start confessing things to strangers. My chest felt tight as I pushed through the last set of doors. Back in the car, I spread the papers across the passenger seat. The due date stared up at me like a deadline for my marriage. The notes about drug exposure and further evaluation sat under it. None of it answered the simplest question about how this even happened. All it did was prove I was not crazy and still completely screwed. I dropped the ultrasound printout on the table between us. Mark glanced down at it once, then back at my face. His fork stopped halfway to his mouth and just stayed there. My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my gums. I knew whatever I said next would not land gently. "I'm pregnant." The words came out flatter than I expected, like I was reading a memo. For a second he did not react at all, which almost hurt more. Then he let out one short laugh that sounded nothing like him. "That a joke or something?" "It's real." My fingers pushed the paper closer until it brushed his hand. I had blood work done, they did a scan, they gave me dates. I kept stacking reasons like they could build a bridge to him. His eyes finally dropped to the numbers printed under the image. He leaned back hard as if the chair burned. His gaze went from the due date to my face and back again. "Explain how this happens because I am not seeing it." He tapped the page once, a quick impatient little hit. I felt my stomach twist like I had swallowed ice. "I don't have a full answer yet." I hated how that sounded the second it left my mouth. "The medication is not perfect, it can fail," the doctor said that. I was talking too fast and I knew it, but I could not slow down. He just watched me with this blank stare that felt worse than yelling. "So let me get this clear." He placed his hands on the table like he was setting up an argument. "You take something that is supposed to stop this from happening. We have not been intimate in months, like you keep reminding me. And yet you somehow ended up pregnant." Each word intimate and months felt like a separate hit. I opened my mouth, closed it, then forced myself to stay upright. "I know what it looks like, but it is not what you think." I hated using that cliché, but nothing else came in time. "I have not been with anyone else, not once." He snorted, a harsh sound that made me flinch. "You expect me to believe this came out of nowhere?" His arm swept toward the printout like it was a fake prop. "You went to a doctor and they just shrugged and said miracle." The way he said miracle made it sound like a dirty word. "They are still running tests, they are checking levels, figuring details." I was trying to remember the exact phrases from the clinic. "They told me rare does not mean impossible, that sometimes things slip through." He stared like I had just quoted a horoscope as evidence. "That is your big defense, sometimes things slip through." I felt heat creep up my neck, shame mixed with anger. "Do you think I wanted this like this?" My voice shook and I hated giving him that weakness. I was terrified to even walk in there, I almost turned around. "You still have not answered the part that matters." He stood up so fast the chair legs scraped hard against the floor. "Who is the father?" The question landed like he had thrown something heavy at me. "I just told you, there is nobody else, I have not cheated." "You are asking me to suspend reality, Lily." Hearing my name in that tone hurt more than the accusation. He started pacing the length of the room, short, restless strides. "We stopped sleeping together, you were fine with that, remember?" His hands cut the air with each sentence like he was slicing it. "Then suddenly you are expecting, and I am supposed to clap." I was not fine with it, I was scared to bring it up. The truth came out before I could evaluate it. That does not change this, I get that, but I need you to hear me. He stopped walking, turned, and fixed me with a cold stare. I hear every word and none of it adds up. He picked up the printout again and studied the dates. What did they tell you about timing? I swallowed, my mouth dry, my voice thin. They think 7 weeks, maybe 8, they will confirm after more tests. He did the math out loud, counting backward under his breath. We did not touch anywhere near then. His eyes came back to mine and they were furious now. You know that, I know that, unless my memory is broken. He laughed once, short and ugly, then shook his head. So your story is that biology glitched for you alone. It is not a story, it is my actual body right now. I pressed a hand against my abdomen without thinking. And whether you believe me or not, there is a baby. Starting. The word baby felt fragile in my mouth, like it did not belong there. He noticed the gesture and his jaw clenched hard. Stop doing that. His eyes flicked to my hand like it offended him. Acting like this is some sweet surprise you get to cradle. He dropped the printout on the table again, this time face down. You are pregnant, and I was benched for the entire season. The sports comparison came out of nowhere and punched me in the gut. You are not benched, you are still part of this if you stay. I heard the last 2 words and wished I could swallow them back. He caught them instantly and his eyebrows shot up. So it already comes down to that, whether I stay. I am trying to be honest with you. My voice cracked and I forced it steady again. There are pieces I do not understand yet, and it scares me. I hated admitting fear to him when he was already doubting me. But I know what I have not done, and I will stand on that. He turned away and walked down the hall without another word. A minute later, I heard the closet door bang open. Hangers rattled and then drawers slid out one after another. I followed, heart pounding so hard I felt it in my throat. He had an overnight bag on the bed and clothes already piled. What are you doing? The question came out small and tight. He did not look at me while he rolled shirts and shoved them in. I cannot share a roof with someone I think lied like this. The word lied landed heavier than anything he had thrown at me yet. I have not lied to you. I stepped closer and he stepped back, like I carried something contagious. We can talk to the doctor together, you can ask questions, all of them. He zipped the bag with one rough motion and finally faced me. I am not playing detective with some random doctor you found today. That one stung because he knew I hated doing any medical thing alone. You want proof? Fine, we can get proof, there are tests. The idea came out in a rush because I needed something concrete. Once the baby is here, we can do a paternity test, an official one. I sounded like a lawyer pitching some deal to a hostile client. His expression shifted then, not softer, just more focused. A test after it is born. He repeated it slowly like he was tasting the idea. So if the kid turns out to be mine, I am supposed to forgive everything. And if it is not, I walk away from both of you. I opened my mouth and found nothing that sounded remotely safe. He apparently took my silence as an answer. Here is how this works for me. He swung the bag off the bed and set it by the door. I will support a child that is proven mine. I am not raising someone else's mistake. That last line sliced through whatever was left of my composure. A mistake. My hand shot back to my stomach like I could shield it from his voice. You are talking about a person, not some lost package. He shut his eyes for a second, then reopened them cooler. I am talking about math and loyalty. He rubbed his forehead like all this gave him a migraine. I did not sign up to be the idiot husband on those message boards. The irony of him saying that, knowing where I would end up posting, hits me now. At that moment, I just felt my cheeks burn with humiliation. I do not know how to fix this tonight. I swallowed hard and tasted bitterness all the way down. But leaving does not make the timeline change, it just leaves me alone. He glanced at the closed bedroom door like the house was shrinking. Being here feels worse than leaving right now. He lifted the bag and brushed past me on his way to the hallway. The movement rocked me half a step and I grabbed the doorframe. Where are you even going? Somewhere I can think, somewhere I do not have to look at you. The honesty in that sentence hurt more than any insult. I followed him to the front door because my legs refused to stop. Are you at least going to check in or just disappear? He paused long enough to put his shoes on with clipped movements. I will text about the test later, once I decide what to do. Then he opened the door and walked out without looking back. I stood there in the doorway, listening to his engine turn over. Each second between the start and the fade out stretched forever. When the sound finally vanished down the street, the silence rushed in. I closed the door slowly and leaned my forehead against the wood. Inside me something fluttered, and I could not tell if it was life or panic. I yanked the fridge calendar down so hard the magnet snapped. The page for this month crumpled in my fist while I stared at the squares. His bag was gone, his car was gone, his side of the bed empty. The only thing left in front of me was time and that stupid due date. I spread the calendar on the table and circled the doctor's estimate in red. Then I started counting backwards with the pen tapping each box. Every square I passed made my chest tig. H-ter because there was no night that fit. It felt like walking down a hallway that led straight into a wall. I grabbed my phone and opened the health app, then the lab portal. Notifications stacked there, all with medical words and dates I did not want. I clicked through the newest ones first, looking for mistakes the doctor might have made. Instead, I kept seeing the same terrifying word over and over in different forms. When the current stuff stopped, the app jumped back to older visits. Appointment reminders scrolled past for random checkups and a flu shot. I was about to close it when one line froze me in place. Follow-up reproductive endocrinology. For a second, I honestly thought the app had glitched and pulled someone else's file. I tapped it and the screen opened to an old summary with a case number. There were notes I did not understand at first, graphs with strange abbreviations. Then my eyes caught one phrase buried in the medical chaos and everything tilted. Cryopreserved embryos storage agreement. My stomach lurched so hard I had to grab the edge of the table. I heard Mark's voice in my head talking about math and loyalty and idiots. Suddenly, the problem in front of me was not only betrayal, it was procedure. I scrolled slower, hunting that phrase like it might vanish if I blinked. There it was again, in a billing note with a specific quantity. Not just sample or material, but an actual number tied to our names. My fingers went numb while my brain tried to catch up with what my eyes read. You know that feeling when a memory returns in pieces, not as one clean replay. Bits of office chairs, signed forms, clipped explanations, all dropping into place. I remembered sitting very straight while someone walked us through options with diagrams. At the time, it all felt theoretical, like planning a trip you never take. Now it did not feel theoretical at all. Now it felt like there was a record somewhere of parts of us on ice. I backed out of the app and opened my email because I needed more. If I had signed something, there had to be a confirmation hidden in there. The search bar blinked at me, waiting for the right word. I typed the clinic name with shaking thumbs and hit search. Dozens of messages flooded the screen, appointment times and lab results and reminders. I scrolled past the top ones and went straight to the oldest thread. There it was, an email with the subject line embryology summary. My pulse kicked up as I tapped it and waited for the text to load. A long block of information filled the screen with bullet points and numbers. My gaze locked on the section labeled Outcome. Number of embryos cryopreserved, 1. I read it out loud, then again, then a third time slower. 1, not 0, not cancelled, not unsuccessful, just one stored item. I had somehow managed to forget an entire sentence that now owned my life. I know how insane that sounds written here. I'm not saying my memory vanished from trauma in some movie way. I am saying I shifted that entire process into some mental drawer labeled paused. Seeing it in writing ripped the drawer open whether I was ready or not. I scrolled further and found the storage contract attached as a PDF. The agreement was dry and ugly and full of rules that now scared me. Right under our names, there was a line about future use and consent. Then there was a section about what happens if instructions are unclear. My brain snagged on that part and would not let go. It spelled out who could authorize use, who could not, under which conditions. There were checkboxes for scenarios that sounded abstract when we clicked them. Now I wanted to go back in time and slap the pens out of our hands. I zoomed in on one sentence near the bottom of the page. In the absence of updated written directives, clinic policies will apply. At the time, that probably sounded harmless, like a standard line. Reading it alone at my table, it sounded more like a loaded gun. I opened the patient portal again and checked the visit history. There was the fertility consult, the retrieval, the follow-up, then nothing. No clear deceased, no destroyed, no donated, just that one word stored. The last activity line was an automatic storage renewal charge. The date on that charge hit me almost as hard as the first test. It was only a few months before my current pregnancy was dated. We had been arguing that week about finances and stress and everything. I had ignored the auto-pay email because it looked routine and boring. I sat back and stared at the screen, breathing shallow. If that embryo still existed somewhere in their system, then so did we. It meant there was at least one version of conception that did not require recent sex. It also meant someone had access to it besides us. A horrible thought crawled into my head and refused to leave. What if the rare thing here was not my medication failing? What if the rare thing as a human error with our stored embryo? I pushed the idea away at first because it sounded almost too wild. Then I remembered the doctor's face when he mentioned timing. The way his eyebrows ticked up for just a breath, then smoothed. The way he asked twice about other partners, like he was ticking boxes. He never once mentioned lab mistakes, but I had not asked either. I opened a new browser tab and typed embryo transfer wrong patient. Hundreds of hits appeared, lawsuits, news stories, statements from clinics. I skimmed headlines faster and faster, feeling sicker with each example. Every article sounded like something that never happens until it does somewhere else. One story mentioned a woman who carried another couple's child accidentally. Another talked about embryos mixed up because of labeling issues. Most of them ended in courtrooms and interviews and broken families. They all had one thing in common, though, which scared me the most. None of those women could explain their pregnancies at first either. They all started out sounding exactly like me, confused and doubted. Doctors treated them like liars or cheaters until records proved otherwise. By the time anyone admitted wrong, the babies were already very real. You would think reading that would give me comfort. Like, hey, see, you might not be losing your mind here. Instead, it made my ribs feel too tight around whatever was growing inside me. Because if I was right, then this was bigger than one marriage. I clicked back to the portal and stared at the storage record again. I wanted it to magically update and show that the embryo had been discarded. If that line changed, my life would still be messy, but at least not terrifying. The screen stayed exactly the same, mocking me with its calm little numbers. I tried calling Mark, even though I knew it was a long shot. The call rang and jumped to voicemail without a single beat of hesitation. I hung up before the tone because I had nothing safe to say yet. I needed more than a theory before I tried to drag him back. Instead, I dialed the clinic's general number and stared at the digits. My thumb hovered over the call button, started to press, then backed off. If I asked the wrong question in the wrong way, they could close ranks. I had no idea how protective they were of their own mistakes. I decided to start smaller and open the secure message option instead. Not as good as a voice, but at least it left a trail with timestamps. I drafted a short note asking for clarification on our storage status. Then I deleted it because it sounded too calm for what I was feeling. The second draft was more direct and probably more unhinged. I asked if any procedures had been performed using our material without us present. I asked for a complete activity log from the lab for the past year. I hovered over send, imagining some administrator reading it and rolling their eyes. In the end, I cut it down to one sentence and a question. Can you please confirm the current status and full usage history of our stored embryo? I figured fewer words left them less room to dodge at first. I hit send and watched the screen flash, message received with fake cheerfulness. Waiting for a reply felt unbearable, so I went hunting for hard copies. There had to be a paper trail somewhere that did not depend on them. I pulled open the filing drawer in the hallway and flipped through old folders. Insurance paperwork spilled out first, then tax forms, then finally the clinic logo. The folder was thicker than I remembered, packed with every visit summary. I laid it on the table and started sorting the pages by date. The retrieval notes were there, detailed and clinical and full of acronyms. At the back, I found a document I swear I had never read properly. Consent for embryo thawing and transfer. My fingertips went cold as I realized our signatures were at the bottom. The date was months before the storage agreement, and another date was blank. There was a section for the physician to complete if a transfer occurred. That part was empty on the copy in my hands, which should have calmed me. Instead, my attention snagged on a tiny printed line in the header. Original maintained in medical record, this copy for patient. If someone had pulled the original later and filled it, my copy would not show it. I stared at the empty signature lines and imagined someone else's pen there. Someone checking boxes we never saw, ticking off steps we never approved. The idea made my skin crawl, but it also lined up with the dates. The possibility sat there, heavy and ugly, refusing to move. I checked my phone again and refreshed the portal messages section. No new replies, just the original text with a timestamp mocking me. I wanted to drive there right then and pound on their glass doors. Instead, I forced myself to sit back down, because rage without a plan is useless. My mind started shifting through the timeline like a detective board. The storage charge date, my missed period, the doctors estimate our dry spell. Every thread pointed away from secret affairs and toward that lab. And I could already hear how crazy that would sound out loud. Hi, I think you accidentally used my embryo on me. I tried the sentence out soft, then louder, and it sounded worse both ways. Clinics do not like hearing the word accident from patients, especially in writing. But if I did not say it, they had no reason to look. I opened a new note on my phone and started listing questions. What is the exact date of last embryo handling? Who had access to our sample and when? Are there logs for each thaw and transfer and who signs them? Typing those lines slowed my breathing a little, gave my panic a script. I told myself that if I treated this like a case, I might not fall apart. It was either that or curl up and wait for someone else to decide my life. And I had already watched Mark walk out once while everyone doubted me. The more I wrote, the clearer one thing became. This was not just about proving I had not cheated. This was about making sure whoever did this could not hide behind rare. If I was carrying a child because of their mistake, they had to say it. A soft ping cut through my thoughts and I almost dropped the phone. The portal banner showed one new message from office staff. My finger trembled as I opened it, half expecting a flat non-answer. Instead, the text inside made my pulse pick up for a different reason. Dear Ms. Redacted, we have received your inquiry and are reviewing your file. Due to the nature of your question, our director would like to speak with you. Please call this direct number at your earliest convenience to schedule a meeting. They did not brush me off. They did not tell me to relax or say everything was standard. They escalated it straight to someone with a title instead of a nurse. That alone told me I had hit a nerve. I stared at the direct line in the message like it might vanish. Then I picked up the phone and dialed it before my courage dropped. Each ring stretched out long and thin while I waited for a voice. When someone finally answered with the director's name, my throat went tight. I forced myself to speak anyway, because this was the point of no return. Hi, this is Lily Redacted, I said, and yes, I know I said no names here, just roll with it. I think there might be a serious problem with how my pregnancy happened. On the other end, there was a pause that felt loaded, not confused. Come in tomorrow morning, the voice replied, very controlled, very careful. We should discuss this in person. No polite chatter, no reassurance, no attempt to minimize my concern. That was when I knew for sure something was off in their house too. I ended the call and set the phone down with shaking hands. Tomorrow, I would walk back into the place that held our file and our future. This time, I would not go as a confused patient begging them to explain me. This time, I would go as someone who finally understood where to start digging. I almost missed the clinic driveway because my hands jerked on the wheel. I pulled in too fast and parked crooked between two painted lines. For a second I gripped the steering wheel so hard my fingers tingled. If I walked inside and this theory was wrong, I lost everything. If I walked inside and it was right, I blew up even more. I forced the door open and made myself put one foot in front of the other. The receptionist looked up with her standard polite half smile that did not reach anywhere. "Check in for an appointment." I slid my ID across the counter like it was evidence. Her eyes flicked to her monitor and something in her posture shifted. "Oh, you're here to see Dr. Harris." Her tone got careful on that last part, like she stepped on glass. "Please have a seat. He asked to be notified as soon as you arrive." That tiny detail told me more than any long speech. Directors do not usually pre-request a random patient from yesterday. I did not sit this time either, my legs refused that much peace. I stood by the wall and pretended to scroll through my phone. Really, I just watched staff move through doors and whispered to myself, "You're going to push this, you are not going to back off." My pulse thudded in my ears like a warning anyway. A nurse opened the inner door and called my last name with a question mark. Her glance at the chart in her hands lasted a little too long. "Right this way, he wants to talk to you before anything else." The phrase "before anything else" sounded like they were trying to get ahead. I followed her down the hall feeling like I was being walked to court. Instead of a regular exam room, she led me into a small conference space. There was a table and a few chairs and nothing else I needed. "Dr. Harris will be in shortly." She set a file down, then paused, then removed it. Again, that tiny move said she did not want me seeing whatever sat inside. When she left, I paced once around the table and forced myself to stop. I rested my hands on the back of a chair to keep them still. I rehearsed the exact words I had promised myself I would use. No jokes, no apologetic tone, just the facts and the massive question. My throat still tightened when the door opened behind me. "Thank you for coming in on short notice." The man who walked in looked practiced and composed and very tired. He closed the door gently, almost slowly, like he was buying a second. He took the seat across from me and placed a thick file in front. My name was on the tab and my stomach clenched anyway. "I understand you have some concerns about your current pregnancy." He folded his hands, but his eyes stayed on my face, not his notes. I could feel myself wanting to shrink under that professional stare. Instead, I dragged the folder of emails from my bag and set it down. Concern is one word for it. I have a positive test, an ultrasound, and a partner who left. The words came out sharp and I did not soften them this time. "I also have documentation that we have an embryo in storage here." His gaze flicked to the copy of the storage contract like a reflex. "In a gestation timeline that does not line up with my sex life." There it was, laid out on the table between us, ugly and plain. He inhaled once, slow, like he already knew that part of the story. "I reviewed your file after your message came through yesterday." His fingers tapped the folder once, then went still. "There are indeed some irregularities that we need to discuss." That word irregularities made my skin prickle for all the wrong reasons. "Did you or anyone here use our embryo without our consent?" I threw it out there before he could steer us into safe phrases. His jaw tightened just barely, then relaxed on purpose. "What I can tell you is that there was an entry logged in error." "In error how?" My voice came out rougher than I intended, and I did not care. "An entry for what exactly?" He opened the file slowly like he was afraid it might explode. "There is a notation indicating an embryo transfer order associated with your chart." My heart seemed to pause, then sprint, then stumble. "I never scheduled any transfer, I was never here for that." "I know." He looked me straight in the eye on that one, and it rattled me. "That is why the notation is deeply concerning." He turned the folder so it faced me, covering part with his hand. "This is internal documentation, not visible to patients in the portal. About 3 months ago, an order was entered to thaw one embryo for transfer." He watched my face as he spoke, measuring every twitch. "Then another entry indicates the order was cancelled on the same day." "Cancelled," I repeated, because the word did not do enough here. "So no transfer happened." I wanted that to come out as a statement, it slipped out as a plea. He hesitated just long enough for panic to bloom again in my chest. That is what the record should mean, however some things are not aligning. What things exactly? I was done with vague creeping language, I wanted nouns and dates. He flipped to a different page with a column of signatures and timestamps. Every thaw and transfer requires multiple checks in staff initials. In your file we see names attached to that cancelled order that should not be there. Should not be there, why? My nails pressed little crescents into my palms, and I did not loosen them. Because you were not scheduled, because your consent form was not updated. His voice stayed measured, but there was an edge under it now. And because the individual who created the order is currently on leave pending review. On leave, I echoed, my mind trying to keep up. As in disciplinary leave. His eyes flicked to the door, then back to me, calculating. We are conducting an internal investigation into their handling of several cases. Yours is one of them. For a second I honestly thought I might throw up on the table. So you are telling me someone here may have used my embryo incorrectly. I heard my volume rise and forced it down with effort. I am carrying a pregnancy that makes zero sense to my life, and your logs show a suspicious order. That is the shape of the situation, yes. He did not look away while he admitted it, which almost made it worse. We do not yet have proof that an actual transfer took place. But we have enough inconsistency that we contacted our legal department. That word legal made the room feel smaller by about half. And we will, of course, be being fully transparent with you going forward. I let out a short, humorless breath, not even a laugh. You are telling me about transparency now, after someone altered my file. He nodded once like he knew exactly how thin that sounded. I understand how hollow that phrase lands aft. Or the fact. But I also cannot undo what has already been done. Silence stretched across the table, not empty, heavy. I could almost hear Mark's voice in my head, cursing under his breath. If this is our embryo, if I was impregnated without my knowledge, what does that even mean legally? I was not even sure which part of that sentence terrified me more. Am I a victim, or just a walking complication on your risk forms? His mouth pressed into a tight line before he answered. From our standpoint, you are a patient who may have been wronged. We are obligated to investigate thoroughly and to report as required. You also have the right to independent counsel, which I strongly recommend. The fact that he recommended that last part made my pulse spike again. So you do think something went very wrong? He exhaled slowly, eyes dropping to his folded hands for a beat. I think we have enough red flags that pretending otherwise would be irresponsible. Your positive pregnancy test coinciding with that internal entry is not something we can ignore. Especially considering the details of your personal history that you shared with your physician. When he said personal history, I knew he meant the dead bedroom piece. The part I had dragged out in that exam room like my own dirty laundry. That means you do not think I cheated. The question fell out before I could stop it, too raw, too exposed. I think your explanation is consistent with what we are seeing in your record. That simple sentence hit harder than anything Mark had said all week. I felt both vindicated and furious that a stranger believed me before my partner. If this is an unauthorized transfer, is the baby still genetically ours? I hated how the word baby shook on my tongue in front of him. Based on the storage record, any embryo in our facility under your name would be biologically yours and your husband's. Would be. Not is. That tiny difference lodged in my brain like a splinter. What do you mean would be? Is there any scenario where that is not true? He opened the file again, slower this time, and my stomach twisted. There is no indication in your chart of donor material being used. His gaze stayed on the pages, not my face, for that answer. However, part of the current review involves ensuring there were no sample mislabelings. Not just in your case, but across all cases this staff member handled. We are cross-checking everything as quickly as possible. I could feel bile rise in my throat while he talked about labels. So there is a non-zero chance this is not even my embryo. My voice cracked on those words, which made me angrier at myself. There is a small chance of mix-up, yes, that is why we are not ruling anything out yet. But the most likely scenario, given your record, is that this pregnancy originates from your stored embryo. Do you know that sensation when two outcomes are both unthinkable? Staying in one body that might not be mine genetically, or realizing that my own embryo was placed without my consent. Either way, I was hosting the consequences of someone else's button push. I pushed my chair back a few inches because the air felt too thick. What are you going to do now, today, not eventually? He straightened in his seat and answered almost like he practiced this. We will be ordering an emergency audit of all related documentation. We will also coordinate genetic testing at the appropriate stage with your permission. At the appropriate stage, I repeated, clinging to each syllable. You mean after the baby is born? He shook his head once, then nodded because it was not that simple. Some tests can be done before delivery, others will need to wait. In either case, the goal is to confirm parentage and process. I rubbed my face with both hands, trying to keep my voice steady. Has anyone reached out to my husband about this? Not yet. We wanted to speak with you first and obtain your consent. He paused, choosing the next words like they were landmines. If this is a lab error, both of you are affected in significant ways. Significant ways is a very polite phrase. I thought about Mark packing his bag, calling our kid someone else's mistake. You realize he walked out because he thought I slept around. My voice dropped on that last part, like if I kept it low it hurt less. And now you are telling me the story he refused to believe might be real. I understand the strain this has placed on your relationship. His eyes met mine again, and there was actual sympathy there, not script. Part of our responsibility will be to document exactly how this occurred. That includes acknowledging where our actions contributed to that strain. Though I know that does not repair the immediate damage at home. He slid a business card across the table with a deliberate motion. This has my direct line, along with the contact for our compliance officer. You are not required to use either. You may go straight to outside representation. I am providing them because whatever you choose, we will need to coordinate. The little rectangle felt heavier than it should when I picked it up. Are you worried I will go to the press? I did not even know where that question came from, it just surfaced. There was the faintest twitch at the corner of his mouth, gone fast. I am worried that you have been placed in an impossible situation on our watch. And that if we do not handle it properly, more harm will follow. That almost honest answer knocked me off balance for a second. He was not begging me to keep quiet, at least not out loud. But I could feel the weight of the whole institution behind his words. You want time to fix your side before this becomes public. We want to understand the full scope so we do not mislead anyone, including you. So what do you need from me right now? It felt strange to ask that when they were the ones who messed up. I would like your permission to retrieve and copy all related materials for you. That includes logs that are not normally shared with patients. You will need them if you pursue any kind of claim, and I suspect you will. That last line made my chest tighten again, in a different way. Having proof meant I was not crazy, but it also meant this was real. Fine, I want every single document where my name appears. I did not bother sounding nice on that one, I was past nice. And I want you to put in writing that you are investigating a potential error. His eyebrows arched a fraction, then lowered in agreement. We can draft a statement acknowledging an internal review related to your case. It will not assign blame yet because we do not have final findings. But it will confirm that you raised this concern and that we take it seriously. That way you are not standing alone if anyone questions your account. Anyone was doing a lot of work in that sentence, and we both knew it. I pictured handing that letter to Mark and watching his expression shift. Whether it shifted toward me or further away, I honestly could not predict. Send any written confirmation to my portal and my email, no delays. He nodded once, almost crisp, like he had already planned to do exactly that. A knock on the door broke the moment like a snapped thread. The same nurse from earlier peeked in with an uncertain glance. Do you need anything for MS Redacted? He asked for a copy of the file to be scanned and secured immediately. Her eyes widened a touch before she caught herself and disappeared again. When the door shut, he looked back at me with a more personal tone. I know this conversation does not solve what you are facing at home. But you are not imagining things, there is something wrong in this record. I did not realize how much I needed someone to say that until right then. It hit me so hard I had to grip the arm of my chair. Will you talk to my husband with me if he agrees to come? The question rushed out before I could weigh how desperate it sounded. If he wishes, I will meet with both of you, yes. As long as you are comfortable with that and it feels safe to you. He deserves to hear exactly what we know from us directly. I nodded once, like I had just agreed to jump off something tall. I will try to get him here, but I cannot promise anything. At minimum, I need that written statement before I even reach out. He promised it would be prepared by the end of the day. I made a mental note to screenshot every line the second it landed. He stood, and for the first time since he came in, his shoulders sagged. Do you have any immediate medical concerns right now physically? It jolted me to remember that there was a body involved, not just paperwork. I shook my head, then paused, then admitted the nausea had been worse. He offered to connect me with an obstetric specialist outside this building. Given the circumstances, you may prefer care in another practice. He was right, and hearing him say it confirmed I would never trust their exams again. I accepted the referral, took the card, and slipped it into my bag. While I did, I felt the faintest flutter low in my abdomen. Not dramatic, just enough to remind me this conversation was not theoretical. When I left the room, the nurse avoided my eyes as she walked me out. Her jaw looked tight, her steps a little too brisk for normal. At the front desk, the receptionist handed me a printed appointment reminder. Except there was no appointment on it, just a note that the director had met with me. That small piece of paper felt like the first page of some thick future file. Outside, I reached my car and leaned both hands on the hood to steady myself. My phone buzzed in my pocket and I almost dropped it, pulling it free. A new notification from the portal lit up the screen with his name. Statement regarding internal review, sat I. And my inbox waiting to be opened. For the first time since the test strips, I realized I finally had proof I was not insane. I opened the statement right there with my hands still shaking. The email loaded piece by piece, logo at the top, my file number under it. Each line I read made my heart pound harder against my ribs. By the end, my vision blurred, not from crying, just from pure overload. They actually wrote it down, in careful language that still screamed. Anomalies identified in documentation related to embryo handling. Possible deviation from established consent protocols. Active investigation into staff conduct impacting your case. There it was in black and white, everything they tried not to say out loud. I took a screenshot before they could change their minds. I did not plan what I texted Mark, and that is obvious now. I attached the screenshot and just typed, "You need to see this." No greeting, no apology, no extra explanation for once. My thumb hovered over send for a full second that stretched forever. Then I hit it before I could talk myself out of it again. The message status changed to delivered and just sat there. I watched the screen like an idiot, waiting for the dots to appear. Nothing. I locked the phone, unlocked it, checked again, still nothing. By the time I pulled out of the lot, my jaw ached from clenching. I drove home on autopilot, every traffic light a blur of decisions. Change lanes, turn here, stop there, all while my brain screamed. Once I parked, I just sat staring at the dashboard. If he ignored that letter, if that still was not enough, I was done. Not with the baby, but with banging my head against his doubt. The phone finally buzzed when I was halfway to the front door. His name flashed on the screen with a short reply under it. What is this? 3 words, no punctuation, no hint of where his head was. I typed erased, then forced myself to keep it simple. Official letter from the clinic, can you come over and read it? This time the dots showed up almost right away. I'm at work, I can stop by later. Later could mean anything, but it was not a no. I answered, I'll be home, front doors unlocked. The rest of the afternoon dragged and sprinted at the same time. I tried to eat and managed a few bites before my stomach rebelled. I checked the portal again even though nothing new would appear that fast. I folded and unfolded the printed statement until the edges curled. Every sound outside made me jerk my head toward the window. He finally knocked even though I told him the door was open. That tiny bit of formality actually hurt more than if he just walked in. I opened it and he stood there, shoulders tight, eyes wary. He stepped inside without brushing against me, like I was wrapped in barbed wire. "Where's the letter?" I handed him the printout without a word and watched his face. His eyes scanned fast at first, then slowed mid-paragraph. He read some lines twice, jaw working, nostrils flaring a little. By the time he reached the bottom, his hand trembled once. He did not sit down, he just kept staring at the page. "They're admitting they messed up." He said it slowly, like each syllable weighed something. "Not fully, but this is bad for them, right?" His gaze snapped up to mine, searching for something. "It's not some generic apology email, if that's what you're asking." I pointed at the phrases that mattered most. Embryo handling, consent protocols, staff conduct. "They're talking about us, about our file." He read those lines again, lips moving without sound. "Does this mean what I think it means?" I swallowed hard because this was the moment I had imagined in the car. "It means they have evidence someone there did something with our embryo. Something they weren't supposed to do, something that lines up with my dates. It means you were right about one thing and wrong about another. Something happened without us, but it wasn't me sneaking around." He dropped into a chair like his legs gave out for a second. His hand stayed on the paper, flattening it on the table. "So when I called this baby somebody else's mistake." His voice snagged on that word like it cut his throat on the way out. "I might have been talking about my own kid." "That's what they think is most likely, yes." I hated how my voice trembled, but I did not hide it. Same genetics, as if it had worked the normal way that first time. Just not when and how we chose. He let out a long breath that sounded more like a leak than a sigh. "I accused you of sleeping with someone over and over." He rubbed his forehead, dragging his fingers through his hair. "I walked out on you, said you lied, said you were trying to trap me." Every sentence made his face tighten more. "I did all that while an entire clinic was messing with our life." "I'm not going to pretend your words didn't land," I answered. "I hear them replay every time." I walk past the bedroom. And no, I don't magically forget just because they screwed up too. My chest burned while I said it, but I needed him to hear it. "I can forgive an error from them faster than deliberate cruelty from you." He flinched at deliberate cruelty like I had slapped him. I was angry and scared, and I went for the easiest explanation. "The ugliest one too, I know that now." He looked at my stomach then, quick, as if he was not allowed to stare. "I should have trusted you before I trusted a pill bottle." That line hit me in a strange place, somewhere between relief and rage. "You trusted a warning label over the person you married, yeah." I let that sit in the air, thick and undeniable. And to be honest, I trusted white coats more than my own instincts too. "So we're both late to the party on believing me." He managed a small, bitter snort at that, eyes still wet. "Did they say if this is definitely our embryo?" The switch in his focus was almost jarring, but I understood it. "They can't promise that yet," I told him and watched his hands clench. "They're running audits, there's a chance of mix-up with other patients. So there's a possibility this isn't even ours." His voice dipped low, almost a growl under the words. "That someone else's child is growing in your body because of them." I nodded once because saying yes out loud felt too heavy. "They'll do genetic testing when it's safe, before and after birth." He stared at the far wall for a long beat, eyes unfocused. "You realize what that means if it's not ours?" "Yeah." I wrapped my arms around myself because I had no better shield. "It means I've been bonding with somebody else's baby without knowing it." "And if it is ours?" He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands locked. "If the tests show this is our kid, what then?" I looked down, then forced myself to meet his eyes again. "Then we raise a child that arrived through malpractice instead of romance." "I don't know how to do that." He sounded smaller on that sentence than I had ever heard him. I can pay child support, I can show up, I can be present. But pretending this is some cute surprise we planned, I can't fake that. I'm not asking you to fake anything, I answered almost too fast. I'm still processing that my body was used like a piece of equipment. I'm still furious with you and with them and honestly with myself. But the baby didn't ask for any of this. Like it or not, somebody is going to love this kid. And I think that somebody should probably be us. He let those sentences hang between us and just breathed. Finally, he pushed the paper back across the table toward me. What did the director tell you exactly when you met with him? That brought me back to the conference room, to his careful words. He walked me through the logs. There's a recorded order that shouldn't exist. I summarized the meeting in short pieces, not pretty, just clear. How an employee initiated a thaw for one embryo under our names. How the system logged signatures on a canceled transfer that still raised alarms. How that same employee was now off the schedule while their work got dissected. How the clinic had already involved their own attorneys before I even stepped in. At least one thing makes sense, Mark muttered, gripping the table edge. If this is from that frozen embryo, then the timing fits perfectly. His mind was already doing the same math I had done with the calendar. It lines up with when they build us for storage again, right? I nodded and my throat burned with how right and twisted that was. So this is what a wanted child shoved into an unwanted timeline. He shook his head, almost laughing from sheer disbelief. We tried for years, then gave up, then this happens in a spreadsheet. He looked at me again, softer this time, almost afraid of his own hope. I don't even know if I'm allowed to be happy about that part. That's the messed up thing, I admitted, voice low. Part of me is furious, part of me is relieved the genetics match. And then I feel disgusting for that tiny piece of relief. Because it took you thinking I cheated to wake this clinic up. And that's a terrible origin story for any family. He reached out, hesitated, then set his hand on the table closer to mine. Not touching yet, just bridging some space that had felt like miles. What do you want to do next? And I mean actually want. Not what the clinic expects, not what some lawyer might say. I need to hear you before everyone else piles on with opinions. I want to keep this baby. The words came out steady in a way that surprised me. That doesn't mean I want to keep this marriage at all costs. But I can't picture handing this child to strangers, not now. If it turns out they're not ours, then we'll face that when we have proof. He absorbed that, jaw working, eyes glistening again. I don't know if I can. Move back and like nothing happened. He glanced toward the hallway, toward our old bedroom. Every time I see that room, I remember what I called you. And what you called the baby, I added quietly because it mattered. His eyes closed for a second, like that line physically hit. Yeah, that too, I hear it in my own head and want to be sick. He opened them again and looked straight at my stomach. Is it okay if I? He lifted his hand a few inches and stopped, waiting. I nodded, not trusting my voice for that one. He reached out and rested his palm lightly on the front of my shirt. It was barely any pressure, just warmth and contact and a strange reverence. We stayed like that for a few heartbeats, both of us breathing shallow. For the first time since this started, he touched me without suspicion. It feels real now, he murmured, more to himself than to me. Not as a problem on paper, but as a someone. The word someone instead of it chipped away at some wall inside me. I still remembered every accusation, but they sounded duller for a moment. Then he dropped his hand and the distance crept back in. I'll come with you to the next meeting, he said finally. With their director, with whatever specialists, with any testing. If anyone tries to spin this like it's partly your fault, I'm not letting that slide. He looked almost angry again, but it was aimed away from me now. They don't get to turn our pain into a neutral chart entry. I'm talking to an attorney too, I told him and watched his reaction. He just nodded like he had already guessed that part. Good, you should, we probably both should. He stood, then hesitated, like his body did not know which direction to move. I can't promise what will be in 6 months, but I won't disappear. That's all I can ask today, I answered and meant it. Show up for the kid, show up for the truth, we'll figure the rest out. It sounded simple coming out, and I knew it was. But it was better than screaming at each other while a clinic hid behind policy. He walked to the door and paused with his hand on the knob. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, still not turning around. "I'm sorry I didn't believe you when you were begging me to." It wasn't enough, not close, but it was a start, and he knew it. He left before I could answer, which maybe was for the best. Any answer would have cracked in half between anger and relief. After he drove away, the house sounded too big and too small at once. I sat down on the couch with the letter in my lap and my phone in my hand. The urge to scream at the world and to hide from it battled inside me. Instead, I opened the app I always scroll when I can't sleep. The place where other people air their disasters to strangers. I started typing before I fully decided to post anything. Throwaway because my real account has family. Clinic may have implanted my stored embryo without consent. Husband thought I cheated. Now we know the baby is probably his. The words looked insane on the screen, even after everything. But they also matched the document in my inbox line for line. I walked through the facts the way I laid them out here. Not every tiny detail, just enough for strangers to understand the chaos. The medication, the no sex, the test, the accusations, the discovery. The meeting with the director, the letter admitting irregular handling. The moment his hand rested on my stomach like it might break. I didn't make myself the saint in the story either, before you ask. I own the parts where I ignored emails, where I let our distance grow. I admitted I froze instead of pushing for answers at the first appointment. Yeah, the clinic did something monstrous, but we built a crack they slid through. That doesn't excuse them, but I'm not pretending I did everything right. By the time I reached the end of the post, my fingers cramped. How do you stay with someone who called your child a mistake? How hard would you push this clinic, legally and publicly? Do you tell the kid one day exactly how they came into the world? I stared at those questions because I honestly had no clue. I finished with the only thing I knew for sure right then. I'm keeping this baby, the rest is negotiable. Lawyers, therapy, maybe divorce, maybe not, I don't know yet. But I needed someone to say, I'm not crazy for thinking this is abuse. Then I hit post and watched the spinning icon load my life into a feed. So that's where I am now, typing this mess out to strangers. Somewhere between victim and parent, somewhere between wife and ex. With a child growing inside me who didn't ask for any of these adults. And with a hospital letter in my inbox that changed everything and nothing at once. If you were me, honestly, what would you do next?